Hello, everybody. Hope we're doing well. I wanted to add a little extra session here, a little freebie, because at the end of the slides that we did yesterday, or there was more slides that I had that I put on in case we had time to do them. I didn't want to have some dead time, and it's some helpful, some useful things. It really, as I began to see these simple little things, it really kind of made a difference in how I connect with people at the workplace. By the way, I'm sorry for the goofy video here. It's with all the yellow whatever it is on there. I don't know if it's because I'm wearing a dark shirt or what, but it normally doesn't do it this badly. But anyway, I wanted to kind of give you a few minutes to just kind of discuss and talk through those things because it kind of helps me to understand a little bit more about how to relate with people that I'm working with. Before I get started on that, though, I would like for you to I'm going to ask you to do something for me, right? So I'd like for you just to describe what I have here. Okay. Just three or four, five, six different ways you can describe what I'm showing you here. uh, Half a dozen, five, three, four, whatever, different statements that describe what these are. Okay, now keep that in mind. We'll talk about that here shortly. But I wanted to do that before I started the share screen because it'd be harder to flip back and forth. It's always awkward to flip back and forth between a live screen and a share screen. So I want to do that first. But let's go ahead and share the screen here and we will carry on with that, okay? So an important part of relating with other people, leading, managing, motivating, whatever you're doing with other people, and just working side by side with them, is to understand some differences in how we connect with the world around us because we all approach things a little bit differently. And there are some kind of common things that we share with one another that some people do one way and some people do another. We talked about this first one a little bit uh, when we're talking about motivation. Is motivation usually people are moving toward to gain something or moving away. Well, it's also a common difference between people. And you'll talk to some people and they're talking about achieving things, getting things, acquiring things, gaining their goals, making progress. And that kind of characterizes the way they live their lives and the way they approach things. You'll talk to other people who are kind of want to be in a safe place. They want to maintain safety. They want to avoid problems. Okay. If side joke here, accountants have a reputation for wanting to avoid problems. Okay, very conservative in their lives, and they're always very have the walls up to try to be protective of problems and avoid problems. Okay, very risk averse, and they don't like to take on risky things because it'll cause problems. So, uh, if you're talking to somebody who has an aggressive mood toward things, you're talking about being safe, and if you're talking from a conservative position of maintaining stability and safety, you've lost them. There's no conversation there. They just, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to do it this way? Why don't we achieve things and accomplish things? And so that's what's one difference. And you learn how to pick this up by talking to people. They're characterized by achievement and more aggressive, uh, pursuing things, gaining things, adding things, and they're going to be moving towards things. Other people who tend to draw back and say I don't want to do this because, or I think we better do this because this is a little better, a safer option, a more secure option. There's less risk, those kinds of things. So, and just you got to get on the same page with people. Okay. Um, Another issue has to do with how we understand and communicate things. Okay. And this is pretty simple and straightforward, but as I begin to see this, wow, this really makes a difference. I've been talking one way and they've been hearing something else, and it doesn't make any sense. So basically, there are different ways we can talk about this, but these are the three that I've kind of landed on that kind of help me to see some differences. There are people who are auditory. They process and they think in terms of what they hear. Okay. And so when they're talking about something, they talk about it slowly, very thorough discussions about things because they're analyzing, thinking in terms of the words that are being shared back and forth. And so they're breaking it down in terms of the words. But again, slow, a relatively slow pace of talk, very thorough discussion, are going to be those types of people. Uh, Visual people see pictures. Okay. Now, if you're describing a picture, you've got a lot of information on the picture you need to get across quickly. And so you talk really quick because you got to talk about this and this and this and how it all fits together. And you're kind of painting a picture for people. And in order to cover the scope of the picture that you're trying to paint, you're talking pretty fast. Okay. But you're also going to have a lot of visual terms, visual words uh, about I see this and look at it this way and those kinds of things. So if they use visual words, seeing and looking kinds of words in there, then they're going to be those types of people that tend to see things in pictures. Okay, and then you have the people who go by their feelings. Okay, they're going to talk. Their pace of their talk is going to be a little bit in the middle. Okay, they're going to talk a little faster than the auditory people, a little slower than the visual people, but they're talking about feeling. This just feels right, or I would feel better if this way. Tell me how you feel about this. Okay, they're sensing and being intuitive about whatever kind of things you're talking about, whatever the conversation is. And if you stop and think about it a little bit, if you're talking to somebody who's auditory, who are going mostly by the words, you can have a bit of a conversation with those feeling kinds of people, but you're still going to be on two different tracks. Okay, one's going to be paying attention to the words, the other's going to be paying attention to the feelings behind the words and start interpreting feelings instead of interpreting the words themselves and taking the words at face values. The visual people, if you're trying to talk to them in very slow, methodical, thorough discussion kind of stuff, you've kind of lost them because they're waiting for the picture, they're waiting for the imagery, and it's just not there. And so and after a while, they just in their minds they walk away. And the same thing with if you talk about feelings and they're thinking in terms of pictures and they're waiting for the picture and the image, and all you're talking about is the emotion, then yeah, I can see some emotion in the picture, but what are you seeing? So again, just listen to people and try to kind of get on the same page with them in terms of what they're seeing and how they communicate, how their minds kind of work. Because you could really totally miss somebody, really have a tough time. Now, a good public speaker, you'll find them doing all kinds of things. They'll be giving examples, they'll be telling stories, they'll be painting images and pictures in along the way. So they'll tell stories, they'll paint pictures, and they'll give you sort of some sensory kinds of things about how it's bring the senses into it as well. So a good public speaker will kind of hit on all three different kinds that way. And then there's another kind of thing I want to kind of brush across is that again we're trying to talk about knowing how people generally connect with their words, and people tend to evaluate or understand things by how they're similar or how they're different. Okay, if 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 you're trying to talk about a new project, they're going to try to understand that project in terms of how it's like what they've done in the past or how it's different from what they've done in the past or some combination of that. Okay, if you have a new idea you want to communicate, okay, if you want to buy another car, whatever it is, they're gonna look at it in terms of how it's similar to things, or they could look at it in terms of how it's different from things. Now, as you might guess, that's what those coins were about. Okay, and my guess is that when you were thinking about how to describe those coins, for most people, the first thing they're going to talk about is they're all coins, they're all metal, they're all American denominations of money, but they're different metals. They're different sizes. They represent different values. Okay, that's going to be the most common thing is to talk about how they're alike first, but then how they're different. Okay, so let's kind of break it down a little bit because if we're talking about whether they're the same or they're different, that kind of gives us four different ways people tend to look at things. So some people always see the similarities. They'll go on and talk about it's money, it's round, they're metal, they're hard, they're American. They all have presidents on them. They have dates on them. They all say "In God We Trust" on them, and they'll keep going on how they're like one another. Okay, and about 10% of the people will focus on how they're alike, and that's kind of all they do is just how things are the same. Okay, then there's those who first will talk about how they're alike, and then they'll start talking about how they're different. Okay. And that's why I said probably it's most likely that you would have done this, because about 55, a little over half the people do that. Their tendency is first to say, these are how they're alike, but this is how they're different. Okay. And then you have the people who are always talking about the differences. Okay. Yeah, they're all different metals, they're different values, different presidents, different whatever, and they're going to the backsides are all different. They're going to talk about how they're all different. Okay. And the bottom line is each one of these is trying to understand, they're trying to make sense of things. They're trying to say, how do I organize this in my head so it makes sense to me? Okay. So there's really not a right or a wrong. Now, these people who are always looking at the differences, sometimes they seem a little obnoxious because they always talk about differences. They're never talking about well, anything in common. Okay. They're always saying, yeah, but, it's kind of the yeah, buts, some of the yeah, buts, because they're always saying, yeah, but, and about 10% of the people do that. But no matter what you say, they're going to say the opposite. No matter what you, and no matter how many times you say, how many different ways you say something, it's always going to come back the opposite. Okay. And so if you say A, they're going to say, yeah, but there's some B in there too. And so if you say they're round, yeah, but they're different sizes. Yeah, they're all it's all money, yeah, but it's different values. Okay, they're all metal, yeah, but they're different metals, and those kinds of things. So they're always going to be yeah, but they're different. Okay, and so again, because they're always seem to be disagreeing with you, and they're really not disagreeing with you. Again, they're just trying to make sense. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to figure stuff out. Okay, and that's how they do it. You're saying one thing, and they're saying, well, this is the other side of it. This is the other side of the picture. Okay, and then there's those who see first the differences, and then then the similarities. Okay, this is the opposite of number two above. First, they're going to talk about something. So, and honestly, this is what I tend to do. It's about 25% of the public does this. So about a fourth of the people are going to do this. First, they're going to talk about they're all different values of money. Uh, they're all different metals, but it's all American money, and they all have presidents and things like that. So the first they'll talk about the differences, and then they'll talk about what they have in common. Now, here's how it works out for me a lot of times: I will be listening to somebody talk about something. I'll be listening to somebody preaching a sermon, and they'll make a point on the sermon. And the first thing my brain tends to do is analyze it, say, yeah, but. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is say, that's not exactly what that means, or the word is really doesn't say it just that way, or something. I'll find something that's different about it. I'll find an exception to it, and then I'll come back after a minute and say, but I can understand where they're coming from, and I see how this all kind of fits together, and I'll kind of package it up again. But the first thing my brain tends to do is to find out how it's different from what they actually said. Okay, find an exception. My brain's thinking in terms of the exception to the rule, and then coming back and then coming into some agreements and looking for the similarities later. Now, again, you can just imagine if you're talking to somebody, and if you're looking for the similarities and they're looking for differences, you can really get at odds with one another, and it can really be frustrating because you think, what's wrong with you that you always see the problems? Well, they're not always seeing the problems; they're just seeing the differences. Okay. Or what's wrong with you that you're always just so namby-pamby all the time and everything's all rosy, touchy-feely, peaceful, wonderful, and stuff like that. Always seeing how things are fine, they're all the same, and everything's good, but you're not seeing these kinds of other kinds of things. Why is it you can only see literally one side of the coin? Okay, and so you can just kind of imagine as you're talking with different people who see things different ways, and honestly, I really there's one guy that I worked with, and the other superintendent with the company had the same problem. It didn't matter what we said to the guy, he was always finding an exception. It was always either why, or yeah, but. And we realized it didn't matter what we said, he was going to say something the opposite. But what I found out was, and this is when we really began to understand that you got to kind of listen for how people are understanding their world, because as he keep asking questions and keep taking the opposite side of things, I realized all he was doing was trying to figure it out. We would talk about giving him some kind of assignment, some tasks to do, and he'd start picking them apart. Why do we need to do it this way? Why can't we do it that way? Why is your way better than my way? Why do we have to use this kind of material or these kind of fasteners or this kind of procedure or do it in this order versus another order? And it wasn't that he was really disagreeing; he just wanted to understand why that was the right thing to do. And honestly, he drove us crazy. But after we began to understand why he was doing that, we just kind of after a while said, okay, we'll just walk through the conversation with him. And he's always going to be disagreeing, but at the end of it, he'll say, okay, I got it. And he'll take off and he'll do a fine job. Okay. But we had to go through that process first. Okay. I worked with a painting contractor one time, and it was a little bit of a different kind of a situation. But normally he worked for us on jobs. He was a contractor. We were a general contractor, and so we would hire him to do painting for us. But he had got a contract to do some renovations and painting on an apartment complex and needed some carpentry work done and some repairs. So he hired us, so we were the subcontractor. And we had one room there that we were using as a shop to kind of put things together and piece things together and then take them and install them in the apartments. But he'd walk in there and he'd start cussing and just dogging us front to back, up and down. We were the most worthless people on the planet. We couldn't do anything right. We were stupid, ignorant folks. And every day he'd come in and do that. And every day I just sit there and fume. I'm thinking, okay. And I had this little bit of a structural mentality that he was over us. I didn't have any, my options were limited in how I address somebody in superior position to me. But after one day, I just said, I've had enough of this stuff. And he walked in, he started, and actually he'd come in and we'd have the place all neat and safe, because it's, having things neat when you're working with cutting boards and have sawdust and scraps and everything. You got to have it swept up, and otherwise you're tripping over things. It's not safe. And so he'd walk in and start kicking our piles around and scattering trash and scraps all over the floor and sawdust and everything. And I just did it. I just tore him up. I just chewed him out top to bottom. Didn't say any bad words, but I just let him have it with both barrels. And after a few seconds, I looked at him. I noticed he was smiling. I thought, huh? Now I get it. Now I get it. He had to know that I was going to stand up. Whenever he was in a conversation with somebody, he had to kind of punch on them and test them to kind of see where they were. Then you could go into conversation. And he worked with us for a few years after that as well. He finally retired. But anytime I would see him, I would just chew him out. First thing right out, because I had to get that out of the way. I had to get that negativity out of the way, and then we were on good terms again. And he walked into our offices one day, and my boss was there. And I walked in and I looked at the guy and I just started chewing him out. He was a worthless guy. He had no idea how to paint a barn. He couldn't do anything right. He didn't know one paint from another. He was colorblind and everything else. And he started smiling. He kind of started feeding it back to me. And my boss is sitting there, his eyes are big. What's going on with you guys? And then we kind of went on about it. And afterwards, after the guy left, I told him, I just found out with the guy, we had to go to blows for a minute first, just so we could kind of feel each other out, get all that garbage out of the way, and then we could have a conversation and we could kind of make some progress. But we never really got anywhere until we got through that. Now, some people will do that once in a while. He did it every time, every time. So, but again, it wasn't a matter of a problem per se. It wasn't a matter of not really getting along and having some personal issues. It was just what he needed to make sense of things, what it was important for him to put his world in order. Okay. And so it was very comforting to him to have that confrontation, because it set things in a proper order, the kind of things that felt normal and natural to him. And back to the same things we're talking about here with whether people see the similarities or differences, it's what's natural, what makes sense to them, and it's how they learn to understand whatever it is that they're dealing with. Okay. And so instead of being frustrated because somebody says, yeah, but all the time, or always takes a different side, or if you're the one that does that, then it can really get, especially if you got two of those kind of people together, the number three folks who talk first about the differences and then, uh, I'm sorry, the number four folks who first talk about the differences and then talk about the similarities. You know, they both start off and they talk about the differences, and all of a sudden they're at loggerheads with each other before they get to the similarity things. They're already just button heads because most of the people that you're going to run into in your life are going to be the different. They're going to look for the similarities first, and so you throw something out and you're expecting some similar kinds of opinions or understanding what things are in common, how things fit together, and they're picking it apart. So what's wrong with you? You know, and so you just begin to understand that people make sense of their worlds. Things kind of click with them. The way that the things that their minds have to go through to set things in order is different for us. And these are some of the ways that we do it differently to set our worlds in order so we can begin to deal with it. And so in leading and managing people, number one, if it's for the whole group, you've got to consider the composition of the group. And if it's a big group or you have a lot of different mix, you got to just like we were talking about with the different kinds of way of, of processing information with these. If it's a presentation to a lot of people, you're trying to cover information to a lot of people, you're going to include different aspects of it. You're going to come at it from different angles. Okay. And so then, but when you're dealing, especially with one-on-one, okay, if you're talking to them as a group and you got to make sure that you're showing them both sides of the coin, what things are come from this angle, how they fit together, how they're different from what we've done in the past, or how it's different from this other kind of stuff. Okay, so you got to cover both sides. Most likely, you're going to talk about the similarities first. This is we did something like this before. Okay, this is kind of like what we did when we did this project. Okay, this is kind of like what we did when we did this. Okay, we got different people, we got different materials, or different situation. We got in a different city. Okay, a little bit different culture. We can still take those basic foundations that we started from, but so you're going to be covering both sides of it. Okay, and these are how it's going to be different. So you got a place for everybody to kind of make a connection with what you're trying to communicate. They can make a connection with the job at hand and what they're dealing with based upon how they're going to sort these things out. So again, just want to take a few minutes to kind of add these things on for you. Fill out the rest of those slides that I've already posted for you. So here's the stuff, and that's a wrap. We are done. This is the little extra bonus session that came for free. You don't have to sit and have a back and forth conversation with me on it. You just get to listen to it and do whatever you want to with it if you like. So, okay. Well, blessings to all you guys. Appreciate you. I'm just tickled to be a part of what you guys are all up to, even though I'm what 8 or 10,000 miles away. I'm enjoying growing connections. So thank you very much. Blessings to you guys, and we will see you later.